You're tuned into the Fresh Ice Hockey Podcast, brought to you by Zeno Pucks. Here are your hosts, Andy and Brian Matusi.
Welcome back to the Fresh Ice Hockey Podcast, presented as always by Zeno Pucks. Brian and Andrew here today. It is the eve of Christmas Eve, or if you're a Friends fan, happy Christmas Eve. December 23rd is the date of this show. We're getting ready for Christmas, but before we do that, we got a couple things we need to talk about, so let's get this show rolling. Andrew, how are you doing?
Hey there, hi there, ho, ho, ho there. Not too bad, man. How's it going?
Pretty good. So I want to start this show with last week we talked about, I promised we would talk about the success that the Kings and that the Oilers have had recently. There's a couple other teams that I've been kind of tracking lately that I want to talk about on this show. So we're going to start with a couple teams in the Western Conference, including LA and Edmonton, of course, that have been playing well, and then we'll move on. And before we close the show out, there's a couple teams out east I want to give props to real quick. But so let's start with the two that we brought up last week, the Oilers and the Kings. Both playing very well. The Kings took a little bit of a slide this week. I think they lost. Yeah, they lost 2 in a row now. But overall, 6-2-2 in their last 10. So LA playing some really sound hockey. They're sitting third in the division right now. And it's kind of been, at least from everything I can see, it's kind of been a winning by committee kind of thing. I haven't seen anything as far as the highlight reel from LA that's wowed me. But you know what? Again, they're 6-2-2 in their last 10. They had a couple games where they scored 5 or more goals. They had a 5-1 win over New York and a 7-3 win over Philly. Most of the play has been resting on the shoulders of Darcy Kemper, who has had a pretty good little run here the last month or so, or last 3 weeks or so. But LA starting to get things going in the right direction, and it's looking more and more each day like the pickup of Kemper was exactly the kind of fit they needed.
Yeah, and that's kind of a weird thing to say. Darcy Kemper is exactly what the team needed. That's a sentence I never thought I'd say. That being said, I don't want it to sound like that I'm ripping on Darcy Kemper, because obviously he does have a Stanley Cup to his name. Not that was due to him, but I am intrigued as to how it's been going for them right now. So keeping an eye on it, because I'm not so sure that it's actually going to last.
I will say part of their good run they had too. I will give credit where it's due. Big Save Dave was in goal for 4 of 5 games in a row that they won. So credit him as well. Kemper was out for a little bit too, I think. And so I don't know if LA was running 3 goalies or if Kemper was injured, but for a while it was Big Save Dave and Portillo was the backup. And so what I mentioned, it's kind of been by committee, and that's a prime example of it there. But LA, again, they've lost 2 in a row now, but one of those was to Washington, and it was on the back end of back-to-backs, and one loss was to Nashville, which is probably one that they would like to have back, but it is what it is, and they're still playing well as a unit.
One thing I want to bring up here, you and I aren't firm believers that one person is the whole team, but me personally, we both know I love just tearing one person apart all the time. Do you think that the departure of Pierre-Luc Dubois has significantly impacted this team? Do you think this has played a role in it, or is this just pure coincidence?
I think it's pure coincidence, because the team Pierre-Luc Dubois went to is Washington, and they've been unbelievably good this year. So and they don't even have Ovechkin. Now, I'm not saying Dubois is the driving factor, but we talked about this guy being a locker room cancer, and Washington's been good vibes all year long. They still don't have Washington, I believe, is still the only team without 10 regulation losses. Sorry, Vegas is the other. There's 2. But yeah, one of 2 teams without 10 regulation losses. I mean, Washington's looked fantastic this year. And again, it's not been because of Pierre-Luc Dubois, but I think LA getting better is just coincidence, and them getting better goaltending, I think, has also gone a long way for them. But again, you're getting better play from Quentin Byfield. And so, I mean, there's many factors that contribute to this. But again, the goaltending's been a big one for a question for LA for some time. And maybe now they have it figured out. Big Save Dave again has been really good for them, and Darcy. Yeah, I can only ever call him Big Save Dave. I
Yeah.
think it's the gift that keeps giving.
Yeah, Joe, it's so great. Especially, it was funnier when it was ironic, but now
Yeah,
it's
yeah. Now he's playing pretty well. So, but again, Kemper's been really good over there. So I think the departure of Dubois is just a coincidental thing because both sides of that trade have benefited from it. So
yeah. Well, that's a good point. I was just thinking about that because I was like, is it a coincidence or did this really help? But in your case, the way you described it, I would say you're right.
I mean, there may be a little. It might have just been not working in LA. I mean, it truthfully could be, but um, time will tell. Again, we still have a whole back half of the season to go, but it is worth at least noting that yeah, both teams in that trade actually did well. Everybody thought Washington got cleaned up on that trade, and really it's worked out well for them. And before too, I assume after the Christmas break, Ovechkin will be back because he's been practicing. So I haven't seen him anything that he is officially back. So I assume he hasn't played, but the Caps, another team we'll get to later, have just been unbelievable this year. Next team is the Edmonton Oilers, who they have really turned up the heat lately. Winners of 3 in a row, 8-2 in their last 10. This is another team where it's been everybody stepping up. The goaltending's vastly improved. The one game that kind of sticks out where it wasn't good was the 6-5 loss to Florida, but that was the first rematch since the Cup final. It was kind of an emotional, kind of crazy game. It was a back and forth battle. So and the other loss was a 1-0 loss to Vegas, so it's not like they got filled in. But the 8 wins have been split between Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard, and they've looked great. McDavid and Draisaitl have, of course, been outstanding. Zach Hyman's finally starting to get going, which makes me wonder if he was injured in preseason or in training camp and was just fighting something off for a while, because he's really ramped it up the last couple of weeks here, and he's been great for the Oilers. And they're not beating just bum teams. I mean, they beat Colorado, who was at the tail end of the Georgiev run, but then they go out, they beat Tampa Bay, they beat the snot out of Minnesota, they beat the snot out of Vegas, they just barely lose to the Panthers, and then they beat the Bruins in overtime, and then just last night they beat Ottawa, who's playing incredible right now too. And I mean, they have beat up on some of the weaker teams. They killed Columbus, they beat San Jose in overtime, which those are games you expect to win, but again, you still have to win them. Just because the teams aren't great doesn't mean you're guaranteed to win. You still have to go out and prove it, and they've done just that. It's been all systems go for them, and much in the same way the Panthers kind of had a lull in this season, and now they're rolling. The Oilers are much the same way now. Everybody, it's all systems go, and they look incredible right now.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I do think if they stay on this track, I say that I would favorite them to win the West again. One thing you brought up Hyman getting ready, or Jesus, you brought up Hyman starting to get going finally, which we love Zach Hyman. I got nothing but good things to say about the guy. But I think this now proves that last season wasn't just a fluke, and you and I know it wasn't. But I see so many of these YouTube hockey fans. And if you're wondering what I mean by that, I mean people who only watch clips of hockey on YouTube and then call themselves hockey fans. But I see these people on social media ripping this guy apart, saying he had a lucky season last year, and that's not the kind of player he is. He's a lower quality NHL player. And I don't agree with that. And this all but proves that. So I'm happy that he's getting going again. And I mean, I don't really want to play them again in the Stanley Cup final, but I'm happy for Hyman, man. The guy, nobody can just let the guy have success, and I think that's what pisses me off.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think it was a fluke. Look, Zach Hyman's a power play specialist for sure. I mean, he definitely does. He's at his best when he's, you know, getting the backdoor feeds from McDavid and from Draisaitl. But it's
Correct.
not an easy living in front of the net. Guys that are net front guys in the power play get their asses kicked in front of the net all season. So it's not for the faint of heart. So to be a 60 goal scorer in this league it is not anything to sneeze at, no matter how you get there. And so that's why I kind of mentioned I think he was fighting something off at the beginning of the year. Just because, man, to not have any goals for such a long time, I'm like, there's just no way. I mean, there was some bad puck luck and stuff too, but I'm like, I don't know, man. It just didn't seem the same. But the vibes are good. He's got that iconic ear to ear smile he's always got on his face. and everything seems to be working really well for the Oilers. In the same way I mentioned, LA's goaltending's been good. Edmonton's been outstanding lately, with the exception of one or two games. And if you look at Skinner, his stat line recently, his last 5 games, his save percentage 952, 923, 929, 955. In there is a 786, and that was the game against the Panthers. And again, super high emotional game. It's a team you just lost in the finals to. I get how one game every now and then can get away from you, but when you're above 920 every other game and above 950 in 2 of them, it's very impressive. And for Pickard too, his last 3 games he's played, 909, 967, and an 864. And again, the 864 game they won against Columbus. So yeah, he gave up 3, but they scored 6. So
Right.
That's a case of a goalie needing his team to have a great game, and they did. And so everything's going really well for the Oilers. And as good as it was going last week when we didn't get a chance to talk about them, it's gotten even better since then. So
Correct.
great for the Oilers thus far.
Well, and I don't want to really count that loss to Florida because we knew that game was going to be insane. It may as well have been game 8 of the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty much what you got out of it. It was a neck and neck game the whole time. Yeah, it was a higher scoring game, but I mean, that game is exactly what I thought it was going to be. It's your first matchup since seeing each other in the Stanley Cup final. You knew Edmonton was going to be out for blood. You know, Florida wanted to prove who they still are. So if I'm Edmonton, I shake that loss off as if it didn't even happen.
Yeah. Yep. So we'll see how things go the rest of the way, but the Oilers do seem like they have finally found it. And I'll tell you what, just a quick aside, had that game gone the other way, you could say the same thing for the Panthers. Yeah, they lost the game, but again, it's a high emotions game. It's
correct.
That first rematch since the final. And Florida, who won that game, would probably most of those guys in that room would be the first to tell you that wasn't even close to the best game that they can play. And I think everybody knows that. I think anytime you give up 5 goals in a game, it's not your best stuff. But you know what? Again, when games are that crazy, sometimes sometimes those are games where you just burn the tape and move on. And for the Oilers, it doesn't seem to have affected them because since that game, I think they won 3 in a row since then. So another team that's won 3 in a row now, and this was one we didn't mention last week, but should mention now, is the Vegas Golden Knights, who have also won 3 in a row and are winners of 8 of their last 10. This is kind of what we expect of Vegas. It was a little slow out of the gate for them, but this is what you expect of the Vegas Golden Knights. They're built about as well as any team in the league. Obviously, they had huge losses this offseason with Marchessault going and with Chandler Stevenson going. But they still have Jack Eichel. They still have Mark Stone. They still have so much talent. Theodore, Hannafin, the whole back end's loaded up. Pietrangelo. This is still an incredibly built team. I expect nothing less than for them to win this division. I think they need to win this division every year. I mean, truthfully, Aiden Hill's a good enough goalie where even on his off days, they can mostly bail him out. But again, you look at their last 10 games too, and it's exactly what you expect. There's a lot of lopsided scores, and for the most part this season, Hill and Samsonov have split the load. Obviously, Hill's taken on a few more games, but for the most part, they've been splitting the workload, and especially the last month or so now, it's worked out very well for them. The offense is going. I've really liked Shea Theodore's season this far. I think this has been his best season thus far. Maybe that's just the eye test saying that to me. I don't have any concrete stats to back it up, but he's just any games of Vegas I've seen this year, he's just looked really good. And so I've liked his play. And again, you continue to expect top end performances from Eichel and from Mark Stone and Carlson and those guys. But and Barbashev too. Barbashev has fit in really well with this team. That's been a deal that has worked out so well for Vegas. Not one that I thought would be substantial, but this team, everywhere you look, there's just good things to say.
This one's hard for me because I haven't watched a single Vegas game this year. So I don't really have a whole lot of input for it other than not being surprised that Vegas is doing well. I mean, you look back how long have they been in the league now? 7 years, 8 years?
8 years. I think this is their 8th season. Yeah, that sounds right.
That sounds about right.
Something like that. Yeah, I think it's their
8th. That sounds about right. Excuse me. So it's 7-8 years in the league, and they've been good every season. It's almost just the norm at this point. So to expect anything else out of them right now would be asinine in my book. So they still have a stacked lineup, like you said. Losing Marchessault in the offseason was big. Marchessault is probably not loving his life right now, but hey, shit happens. So, but that being said, with Vegas, I still fully intend or predict that they're going to make a good playoff run and not bounce in the first round this year. So we'll see.
Yep. So again, Vegas. Not that I'm overly surprised. It's just we had to give them their flowers. They've just been playing so well, even though it's kind of expected of them at this point. Still something worth mentioning. I mean, they've just been unreal lately. And again, I don't see it stopping anytime soon. It's just such a good group they have there. And if health is not a factor, I see another long playoff run in the very near future for them. You mentioned it's seeing Edmonton coming out of the West. A healthy Vegas squad in the Western Conference Final against Edmonton last year might have been too much for Edmonton to handle. Obviously, we didn't get that as Vegas just ran out of gas in round one. But um, boy, I tell you what, it wouldn't work out this way because I don't think Vegas or Edmonton will be wild card teams, but a conference final between these two would be outstanding. But any kind of playoff series between these two would be nuts. I would pay money to see that. So we'll have to see what the future holds for us. But yeah, I wanted to give those teams in the Pacific some love because they've been absolutely rolling. And outside of the Canucks, who are even kind of struggling lately too, 3 wins in their last 10. But outside of them, really the rest of the division has kind of fallen apart. Seattle's lost 5 in a row. Calgary's won 4 out of their last 10. Anaheim and San Jose are. San Jose's fun to watch, but they're third last in the conference. Anaheim is just okay, and so while most of the division's been pretty lackluster, those 3 teams have really put on some good performances, especially the last month or so now. So
Right.
before we move on to our next segment, we just have to give love to one more Western Conference team. That is the Colorado Avalanche, who in the last month have traded both of their goalies out, brought in 2 new guys. They obviously kick out Georgiev and Annunen. They bring in Scott Wedgwood and Mackenzie Blackwood, who have both been fantastic for them. Colorado's now won 7 of their last 10 games, including 3 in a row. And it's been on the backs of both goalies. I think I have the numbers here. Wedgwood's won 4 of his last 6 with Colorado, and Mackenzie Blackwood has won 3 of 4 since joining the team. And they have both kind of come as advertised. Wedgwood is a guy where it's a great backup. He's going to give you pretty solid outings every night, and he's done mostly that. Mackenzie Blackwood in his 4 games with Colorado, save percentages of .949, .941, .917, and .895. It's worth noting the .895 save percentage was a game against the Kraken that they did win. But he only faced 19 shots and allowed 2 goals. So that's why there's the low percentage there. But I mentioned when he came over, this is a very technically sound goalie. He's a big guy too. He's 6'4", 225. He takes up a lot of net. He's very positionally sound. He's never out of his crease, caught making a mess in his own goal. So to play behind a team as highly skilled as Colorado, this is like a perfect match. You need a guy that's again very technically a straightforward goalie, nothing flashy, just in the right place at the right time all the time. And when you're behind an elite defense like Colorado, this is like a match made in heaven. And thus far, it's looked fantastic with bringing over both of those goalies.
If only they could have just done this a year ago. Just think of where they could have been already.
Listen, I will say, while you are right, I will say that as much as we bitched and moaned about them not making a change in their goaltending, now that they've finally done it, not only did they do it, but they doubled down and got 2 new goalies, and they both have been fantastic. So as much as we talked shit about them for not doing anything for the longest time, I do think it's appropriate that we give them the correct praise now that the moves they've made have been right on the button, at least the last 3 weeks or so now. They've just been incredible.
I don't disagree with you at all. And maybe obviously you and I are just two guys doing a podcast, so we don't know what the conversations inside that front office looked like this last year. I mean, maybe they've been working on this for a while and thinking about the best way to go about it. We don't know. So, and you don't want to dwell on the past either. So it's working out for them now. It's working out exceptionally well, I would argue. So give them the praise they deserve, and we'll see how long it lasts.
Yep, I would. I envision this working out long term. By the way, something that I just noticed as you were talking about that, Mackenzie Blackwood was traded on his birthday. December 9th was Mackenzie Blackwood's 28th birthday. And according to this article from ESPN.com, it looks like that was the day he was also traded.
Oh,
so
nice.
It's kind of weird how that works out. But yeah, Mackenzie Blackwood celebrating his 28th birthday by going to a team that, if they keep playing like this, will be one of the favorites to win the Stanley Cup in a couple of months. So
yeah,
we'll see how everything pans out there. But yeah, the Avs, again, similar to Vegas, now that they have goaltending, a team that is so well constructed that you only expect the best from them. So Colorado, when we get to April and when we do our playoff brackets, this is the team I envision in one of those top 3 spots in the Central, if not 1 or 2. Probably, I would assume they'll finish first or second if they keep going this way with these goalies. But this is what we expect of this team now. They have goaltending. We can let that ship sail. If these guys even are league average, they're going to be an unbelievable team. So, I mean, we saw what they did with Darcy Kemper when he was league average. If you bring in Blackwood like this and he keeps playing like this, that's going to be a hard team to stop. So wanted to give those teams in the West some love. And now, before we move on to some stuff that happened out East, I want to let you have a second to do the Warrior for Life reading.
Thank you. Gotta admit though, it's definitely not a reading because I sit here every week and just do it off the top of my head. So love you, Warrior for Life.
Yeah. The Xenopucks thing is a reading.
The Xenopucks thing is a read, but we have a legitimate partnership with them.
That is true.
I wanted to truly sound professional for them, especially because they're growing their brand, as are we. So Warrior for Life Fund, I talk about them every week. Is a nonprofit organization that helps military service members and their families readjust to civilian life, whether they're coming home from a deployment or if they're getting out of the service. And they do so through the game of hockey. They have their own team of Warrior for Life All-Stars. Many of them are former Naval Special Operations veterans, not just Navy, but Special Operations veterans in general. All the games they play, they're partnered with the Bruins Alumni Association. They're partnered with the NHL, and they travel around the country playing different games. And each game they play is a memorial game named after a fallen service member. They do a lot of good. It helps build camaraderie for these guys trying to get accustomed to being in the civilian world again, which is a wonderful tool to have. It's obviously not something that's cheap to do. They do run off of donations. So if it's something that you're interested in, you'd like to help out, you can head over to warriorforlifefund.org and make a donation today. It's hockey season, and you're looking to work on your stick handling or maybe even your shot, but ice time just isn't an option for you right now. Luckily, our buddies over at Xenopucks have got you covered. They've developed an elite off-ice practice puck that, in addition to looking like the real thing, is the same size and weight as a regulation hockey puck to give you that authentic feel on the end of your stick. It works better than other off-ice practice pucks on almost any surface, whether you use it on hardwood, carpet, concrete, or even asphalt. Xenopucks glide like a real puck on ice. So if you're looking to improve your game without setting foot on the ice, head over to www.xenopucks.com and get yourself a puck. Check out their merch selection and be sure to follow them on Instagram at Xenopucks.
Alrighty. Love to hear it as always. Let's move out east here, and I think we'll start with the New York Rangers, as we originally had one piece of news, but then Matt Rempe had to go out and make us a second piece of news. So
I can't wait, dude. Go ahead.
We'll talk about the Cabo Caco trade first, because that's actually what I wanted this segment to be about. I wanted to talk about the Rangers season and in this trade, and then we'll get to Matt Rempe in a little bit, because he just. Boy, well, we'll talk about that in a second. So, Capo Caco goes over to the Rangers, or goes from the Rangers over to the Seattle Kraken in exchange for defenseman Will Borgen. The Rangers desperately trying to do anything to salvage this season that is quickly blown up in their faces. Rangers are 3-7 in their last 10 games. That includes a loss this afternoon to, I believe, the New Jersey Devils. Yeah. Look, it's not been pretty for the Rangers. They are tied for second last in their division. I mean, they've been passed up by Philly, by Pittsburgh. It's just they have a long climb ahead of them. I mean, they're 5 points out of the wild card race, I think, or sorry. Yeah, it looks like they're 5 points out of the wild card race right now. So it's not been great in New York. The fans are calling for Chris Drury's job, rightfully so, in my opinion. Now they healthy scratch Kreider's for today's game against the Devils. Currently, the league is under a trade freeze that happens every year around Christmas, obviously to prevent players from being traded over the holiday, which can really upend some people's lives. So, but Kreider scratched for this game today against New Jersey. The Rangers, of course, promptly lose the game. It seems like Kreider is potentially on his way out. I guess we won't know more until I think the 28th is the soonest that trades can be made again. But for the Rangers, this season has blown up in their face, and so I think Kako probably had more value last year as a trade piece, but with how good the Rangers season was last year and how deep their postseason run was, it was easy to see why they wouldn't want to move on from a guy like that, especially since it seemed like he took a step forward. But this year hasn't quite been what they were hoping for from him, and they go out and they get Will Borgen, who I thought has been a really good fit in Seattle. I know he played a lot last year. I think he was paired with Jamie Alexiak. So not a horrible, you know, I don't want to say not a horrible, a really good move, I think, by the Rangers to bring in a guy like this while you're tinkering with your lineup, trying to find anything that'll work. I think a sound defensive piece like Will Borgen will slot in great in front of Igor Shesterkin.
Yeah, well, honestly, at this rate, well, maybe not at this rate, but last year's Igor Shesterkin, if anybody could have slotted in great in front of him.
Yeah, they probably. I mean, outside of you and me, I think anybody could have probably jumped on the ice in front of him and done okay.
Yeah.
But and again, for the Rangers, they needed defense. Obviously, with Trouba being moved out, Borgen comes in at a significantly lower cap hit and probably you could argue a higher skill level. So a worthwhile experiment for the Rangers, capitalizing on the value that they still had in Capo Caco. And he goes over to Seattle and promptly scores his first goal with them like right away. And it was a pretty goal too. So this is a deal that looks like it could work out very well for both sides. But for the Rangers, there's still a ton of questions left to be answered. And obviously I mentioned before that Seattle, this has just not been the year they've been hoping for, but hopefully for the future, this move works out well for both teams.
Well, I have a buddy who's an avid listener of this podcast, and he is a very committed New York Rangers fan. And last year, he and I almost every day were texting, talking hockey, and it's been radio silence this season from him. I haven't heard a peep about hockey from him. So,
well, and for what it's worth, the Rangers had a pretty good start to the year. It's just blown up in their faces now.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I just haven't heard from him. I mean, I talk to him still pretty regularly, but I haven't heard a peep about him or peep from him about the Rangers. So, I know he's in his feelings right now, as I'm sure a lot of Rangers fans are, hoping that somehow, some way, they can figure out how to turn this season around.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is in New York, but again, since they traded Trouba and paid Igor, it has just been rotten there. So I don't know what's missing, what the missing pieces here. Maybe maybe a GM move is needed, but is coaching the problem? I mean, this core of players is already on its third coach. They had, I think they were at the tail end of the David Quinn era, and then they gave Gerard Gallant like 20 minutes to coach the team, and then they fired him, and now they're on Laviolette, I think, is the coach there, and so as much as people normally are screaming for the coach to be fired, do you really want to put this core group of players through another coach? I mean, that's how you start getting guys to request a trade out of town. And for the Rangers, who are probably the biggest American market in the NHL, I mean, as far as population, they are the biggest because New York's the biggest city, but one of your most popular markets, that's how you start chasing guys out of town, even in a market that big, is when you just have the spin cycle going, a new GM, new coach all the time. I mean, you don't you don't want to just start firing guys, but what's missing for the Rangers, I don't know, and I would love for our Rangers fan listeners to chime in here and reach out to us through DMs or emails, any kind of comments. I haven't watched enough Rangers games to know, but I mostly haven't tuned into their games because I just figured it's a given that they would win most of these games, and they just really haven't, and it's just kind of been a mess.
Yeah, and I know Bob will tune in, and yes, his name's Bob. I'm not making that up. I know he'll shoot me over a text regarding this after he hears this episode. But like you said, you don't know what the answer is here because nobody knows what is actually going on with this team right now, what's causing this slump they're in. And I want to point out, I don't think it's coaching. I think Laviolette is a great coach, and I don't think that's somebody you want to send out of town right now. Like you said, this core group of players is already on their third coach. Why do you want to do that in this market? Maybe I don't even think a front office change is necessary. I think there's something else going on here. I don't know if it's a chemistry issue. I'm not sure what it is. But for a team to be as good as they were last year and make it all the way to the conference final and then come out, have a pretty good start to the season, and now are just almost to the point of being unwatchable. I don't know where you go from here.
Yeah, and it's really been kind of an indictment on the state of New York hockey this year. The Islanders are tied with the Rangers for second last in the conference. They've won 5 of their last 10. They've just been very mediocre. Not really sure what the answer is there. They're actually playing, as we record, they're playing another New York team, the Sabres, who are in the midst of a 13-game losing streak. I mean, all 3 of these teams have had what I would, especially Buffalo, but the other 2 New York teams too, would tell you are just terrible seasons. And it doesn't really seem like there is a bright light at the end of the tunnel for the Sabres and the Islanders. There can be one for the Rangers, but the turnaround needs to be quick because we're going to start the new year. And then, next Wednesday starts the new year, the calendar year. And these guys got to kick it into gear if they want to climb back into the playoffs. I think we're going to reach the point with the Islanders pretty soon where it's too late to salvage. I don't think the skill level's there for the Islanders either, which is part of the problem. And for the Sabres, you can already write this year off. Bottom of the conference, 13 losses in a row. It's easy to beat up on the Sabres, and we have the last few shows. So for Christmas, I'm going to save the Sabres fans me running them over again because
Yeah, give them a break, man.
they've heard it everywhere. Hockey radio, podcasts, everyone's dumping on the Sabres. It's no secret what's going on. So we'll just leave it there. But to come back to the Rangers here, I don't know what the fix is here because the skill level, we know the skill level's there. We know this team is capable of making a deep playoff run. They just did it. And so it's up to management to figure out what to do to fix this. But it seems like the fans and the media have called for his job a few times this year, and I have a feeling I just get this feeling he won't make it very far into 2025 with his job, but the only time will tell. I'm interested to see what happens with Chris Kreider as well.
Well, I'll tell you right now, if they end up canning him, Laviolette, he won't be out of a job long.
I don't think Laviolette will go. I think Drury's out though. I think they're going to look for a new GM. I don't know. I just don't see it lasting.
Kreider too, though.
Oh, yeah.
Same thing with Kreider.
Well, no, listen, whatever team Chris Kreider ends up playing for, whether he stays a Ranger or not, we'll be very happy to have him. He is too skilled a player. And I know the season hasn't been good for him, but he's too skilled a player to not land a spot on a team. And he's a fast skater. He can be a great playoff performer. I think this guy will, if he does get traded, whoever he goes to will extremely benefit from the trade.
Yeah. And, sometimes I hate to say that this is the issue too, but sometimes you just need a change of scenery, man. And there's nothing you can do about it. Sometimes it's just the way it goes. So.
Yep. Speaking of change of scenery, Matt Rempe, instead of watching the games on the ice, will be watching them from the press box due to an 8-game suspension he has received from the NHL from his elbow/boarding hit on Dallas Stars defenseman Miro Heiskanen. Everybody by now has probably seen the hit. If you haven't, you can look it up on YouTube. It is a pretty nasty hit. Glad Heiskanen seems to be okay. I haven't seen anything that he's out or anything like that. But Rempe, 4 ejections in 22 career regular season games is a terrible look. He's got to get it under control. I know part of it isn't on him because he's so big. Everybody is at elbow height for him, but you
Okay.
gotta get it in check for him. He's got to get it in check. There's just no future for him in the league if he can't stop blowing guys' brains out of their head with his elbows. So 4 ejections in 22 games is a horrible stretch for anybody, but for it to be in your first 22 games of your career, I mean, he's missed almost as many games as he's played, for Christ's sake.
Yeah. First thing I want to say is nice transition into the Matt Rempe thing. That was nicely done with the change of scenery. Second thing I want to say about this fucking rock star. This guy is as dumb as everybody pretends Rob Gronkowski is. I'm serious. He is. He's absolutely stupid. The guy's a fucking goon. He's useless. All he's good for is hurting people. He has absolutely no skill as far as I'm concerned. He's a fucking waste of space in the lineup.
He's really not a great fighter either.
Yeah, well, he's not a great fighter.
Really
like I said, the only thing he has going for him is his size. That's it. He's not a good hockey player. I don't know how the hell he has a spot on an NHL roster, much less the New York Rangers for that matter. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Get him off your roster, first of all. He's a liability to your team at the end of the day.
You know, it is funny. We talked about the Rangers needing to find some solution to their problems. I think playing a bum that plays 6 minutes a night and then gets ejected, I think that's part of fixing your team's problems is not wasting a roster spot on a guy like that. And that's just my own opinion there. I think there are better solutions than playing that bum every night. It's like it's a waste of a roster spot at this point is all it is. He can't score. He skates like shit. He can't fight clearly. The only thing I've seen him be able to do is throw nasty hits. And I mean, he has won a couple fights, but the fights he's lost, he's just got his shit kicked in. And it's pretty tough to watch because the kid just can't defend himself. And so I like the vibes for New York that he brought when he first came into the league, but it's kind of a circus show right now for a team that's having a really horrible stretch in this part of their season. The last thing you need is this guy being a distraction because he can't fucking keep his, he can't stay disciplined during a game. You're already in a stretch where you've lost 7 of 10 games, all in regulation, mind you. You can't have this guy go out and blow up one of the best defenders in the league in Miro Heiskanen. And I maybe that shouldn't play a part in how long his suspension is, but for a guy for a guy who's a nobody essentially in the league like him to go out and hit a guy who's as well respected and highly skilled as Miro Heiskanen is, I think is a really bad look for the league. I kind of attested it to the John Scott blindside hit on Louis Eriksson. This is like 10 years ago, but it was a disgusting hit. And it's kind of where John Scott, this was the early years of John Scott. I think this was 2 seasons before his All-Star appearance, which was a mess. But at the time, it was kind of the same thing. Louis Eriksson was a really, really good player in the league, really well-respected guy. And John Scott, again, was a goon who goes out and just blindside elbow in the middle at center ice to Louis Eriksson. And that's kind of what this is. Heiskanen was never facing the play. He had his back to him the whole time. Rempe comes in and just throws this nasty elbow that just pancakes Miro Heiskanen into the boards. And so for a guy like this to be in the league, to me, is kind of disgraceful. And, an 8-game suspension is more than deserving because this guy's really got to get his shit together if he wants to stay in this league long term.
Absolutely. And the fact that I've seen people saying 8's too many or that was clearly not an intentional hit. Enough. No, I don't think it was enough. 2, if you think that hit was unintentional, stop watching hockey. That's all I'm going to say. You're stupid.
The thing that bothers me specifically with this suspension is the final game of Matt Rempe's suspension is the Rangers' next game against Dallas. They only play him twice a year, and the next game that they play Dallas will be the final game of Rempe's suspension, which makes me wonder if the suspension was originally going to be shorter and that they only extended it so Rempe wouldn't play Dallas twice. I don't know if that was the case or if it was just a coincidence, but to me, this had all the earmarks of like a 10 to 15 game suspension. The fact that the final game of the suspension is their next one against Dallas makes me think it was actually going to be originally shorter.
I can see why you think that, but taking a step back and looking at it again, I think that's just pure coincidence.
It could very well be. 8 games just seems like a a really oddly specific choice.
I thought he was going to get 10, or that's what I was hoping
I
for.
was thinking 10. I was hoping 15 because I'm just tired of him. But
Well,
again, he has
same,
only
but
played 22 games in the league, so I get it. But yeah, that was a pretty vicious one. I do think they did it. They sent a good message, though. 8 is a substantial amount of games. That's essentially 1/10 of your season right out the window. And for him on the contract he's on, that's a pretty sizable amount of money to forfeit.
yeah.
So, which is good. I mean, that's how you learn a lesson. Is you do something dumb like that, you pay the price for it.
Now, is he still on an AHL contract, or I'm sorry, is he still on a two-way contract, or is he, what is
That
he?
I would have to look up. I can actually pull that up.
Because I'm curious as to what he's making. If he's making league minimum, which would be league maximum for the AHL. But yeah, I'm just curious as to what he makes.
Let's see. He is on year 3 of 3. I don't think this is an entry level deal. Oh, it is. This is his entry level contract, so it is a 2-way deal.
Okay.
820,000 a year. I think it's got to be 2-way. Let's see here. Waivers exempt. Let's see. Well, that's because he's so young. I'm not seeing anything if it's 1 or 2-way deal. I assume based on solely on his age that it is. But that's regardless. It is a 2-way deal. He makes 70,000 a year in the minors. But again, because he's been in the NHL all season, and I assume he'll stay there, making 820 grand a year, so missing 10 games roughly will cost him about $82,000, which a guy making 800 grand, losing 82,000 of that is a pretty sizable blow.
Right. Well, I mean, that's 10 grand a game. So that's a lot of money.
That's money he just threw away just because he wanted to be an idiot.
And one thing, because I've seen people say this too, so I want to throw this out there. I get he's a young kid. Totally get it. Everybody makes mistakes. But when you're out there trying to hurt people, that's not okay. I don't care how long you have or haven't been in the league. That's never okay, ever, especially at his size. He could be out there literally killing people. It's just not a good look, and he needs to be taught a lesson. Do I think 8 games teaches a lesson here? Absolutely. For me personally, and you can take away the bias of me not liking him as it is, but just as a hockey fan, I think he should have gotten a few more games than that. I would have been happy with 10, but I do think 8 still sends a message.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, and you mentioned it too, it's funny, if you look on ESPN.com, it shows on his player profile that he's suspended, which is hilarious. It just says status suspended. So you mentioned he's a young kid. He is 22. He is technically, by NHL's definition, he is still a rookie. As he didn't, I think you have to play 25 or 23 games in a regular season for it to count as your rookie year, which is how Matt Murray won 2 Stanley Cups despite being a rookie for both of them.
Yeah.
Anyways, Rempe, you mentioned, again, he's a young kid, but for what it's worth, first of all, 2 points in 22 career games, 1 goal, 1 assist. He's got no points this season. And for this season, he has 24 penalty minutes in 5 games played. That is terrible.
That's a fucking tough
1
look.
shot on goal this season, averaging 6:15 of time on ice a game for his career, 5 minutes 46 seconds a night. He's exactly how I described. He's playing 5 minutes a night. He's a bum. He's 6'7", 241. He's just dangerous out on the ice. They need to get him under control. His most iconic moment of his offseason training was the training he did, I think, with George Laraque, with all the fighting he did. And he probably should have spent some time with the coaches, keeping his fucking elbows tucked in and, learning to play a more disciplined game, because this is an embarrassing stat line for a player. If you showed this to somebody who wasn't a hockey fan and said, yeah, this guy who's not scored or done jack shit the entire season just got suspended 8 games for throwing an elbow, they'd be like, wow, that sounds really fucking dumb. And you know what? They would be right.
Yeah. No, he like we mentioned earlier, he is a waste of a roster spot for somebody who's much more deserving. So it's kind of aggravating to see. I don't like the guy, so I'm not going to sit here and give him any kind of compliments or benefit of the doubt or anything. What he did is unacceptable, and I hope he actually learns a lesson from this. But as most goons, he probably won't. So. Well, I guess we'll just see how it plays out. But I do say I do applaud the player safety department because I
Which
think
is
8
something
games
we
is,
would never say.
yeah, that's something that you rarely ever hear. You might hear that once every couple years. So, but hey, 8 games is good enough for me at this point.
All right. Well, let's move on here. I don't want to give that too much more time, other than I do agree with you that I hope he learns his lesson and just gets his shit together, because a guy of his size could be a menace if he plays correctly.
Correct.
Let's move on and talk about, we just talked about the Rangers. We'll talk about the Devils now. Devils just beating the Rangers today.
The
Um,
Devils.
yeah, gosh, with your Kenny Danica voice.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's rough, eh? Holy cow.
Yeah.
Devils fans
tell me
know
about it.
listen, Devils fans, you're a fun team to watch, but man, is
You're a
Ken
color
Danica.
commentator.
I'm listen, he was an outstanding hockey player, not the best color analyst I've ever heard. But the Devils have been fantastic. Winners of 7 of their last 10. Currently first place in the Metro Division, just ahead of Washington. Now, it's worth noting the Devils have played 4 more games than the Capitals and only sit 1 point ahead of them. So Washington will probably close that gap and take the division lead back. But for now, Jersey sits atop of the division as they head into the Christmas break. And it's been looking great for Jersey lately. The Hughes brothers are playing great. Jack's been rolling. I think it's fair enough at this point to say that picking up Jacob Markstrom was a great move for the Devils, and Jake Allen too. I don't want to take any away from him. It's just Markstrom has shouldered most of the workload this season,
Yeah.
and I mean it's worked out well for him. He's won his last 5 starts. And his last 2 starts were both shutouts. He shut out the Rangers today and shut out the Penguins on Saturday. And then in his previous 3 starts, only allowed 1 goal. And that was versus LA, Chicago, and St. Louis. So Markstrom has just been unbelievable for them this year. And actually, I need to pull up his player profile too, which I should have done before I started the show, but I didn't. Markstrom is a .912 save percentage on the year. 2.2 goals against average. He's 18, 6-2. His 18 wins are good for second in the league. Really solid pickup for the Devils. I mean, we kind of were in agreement. Sorry, agreeance. I think that should be the title of this episode. Agreeance.
Yeah. You know what? It will be.
Yeah, I think agreeance is a good one.
Yeah.
But we were both kind of in agreement when they picked up Jake Markstrom that this was a great move for them, and it has clearly panned out well. And especially lately, the last couple of weeks, he's just been incredible. So the Devils have gotten things going. It was a little rough going at first, but now they're on a heater now.
Dude, autocorrect's gonna think I'm having a stroke when I go to type that in for the episode name.
Yeah, agreeance. How do you even spell that?
Yeah,
is that with 2 E's or just one? You shave one of the E's off and turn it into an A.
Yeah, I think if you shave one of the E's off, it just turns into Agreeance.
Yeah, I think you need to. So
yeah,
for our made up word.
Yeah, that's what we do on this show, man.
Oh, man.
One thing I want to point out too is we haven't really made any mention of this, unless I'm just dreaming this. But Sheldon Keefe is the head coach of the New Jersey Devils.
Yeah. That's a good point. Look, again, I know we mentioned that Washington is going to probably pass them here with the 4 games in hand, but Keefe has looked really good as the coach of New Jersey. Now that he's had time to get everything kind of their systems in place and the style they want to play, it's working really well. For those, by the time anybody listens to this, it'll likely be tomorrow, so it'll likely be Christmas Eve. If you haven't, take a look at the goal that Jack Hughes scored. It was assisted by his brother too. Just a pretty play. The Devils just look like they're just really feeling great. That's a play of a team that's confident. And when Jack Hughes is going, he famously got off to that 3-point a game pace last season before his injury. And man, the Devils just look really good now.
Yeah, we knew this is what this team was capable of, though, and we talked about it. I don't remember if it was during the off season or if it was during last season's playoffs, but you knew that Vegas, how's it going? You knew that Jersey was gonna turn it around this year. I think last year too, it was kind of everybody expected more out of them, and between injuries and other things, it didn't go the way they wanted to, and you knew coming into it, you got a new head coach in town now. you knew that they were going to kind of turn things around this year. And I will say they're actually doing far better than what I expected. But I'm not surprised because I knew usually when a team brings in a new head coach, usually the what's the word I'm looking for? Not the results, but you can see the impact almost instantly, usually.
There is a sense of urgency usually from the players when a new
Yes.
coach comes in.
Yeah, and I mean, I know people can sit here and say, "Well, what about Columbus?" Look, Columbus is a different animal right now, man.
Columbus is, because of everything that happened in their offseason. It's not it's too much of an apples to oranges.
Correct, exactly. So, and I mean, that's probably a bad comparison to make on my end, but just in case there's someone out there that's like, "Well, Columbus got a new head coach." Yeah, that's why I said most of the time you can see it almost instantly.
Also not a great coach. I just
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah.
So at least it's not Babcock.
Wow. I'll tell you what, as much as we dunk on him, if Babcock was the coach of that team, they'd probably be better. But
probably, yeah. That's because they'd be fearing for their life.
Time. Yeah, I was gonna say it.
That there's
he'd have all their phones in his fucking locker in his desk. That's why,
dude. Yeah, if there's one thing I will always take an opportunity to do on this show, it's bash on Mike Babcock. So.
Yeah, that is Stanley Cup winner and Olympic gold medalist Mike Babcock. I will have you know.
Yeah, well,
he sucks. Yeah,
I was gonna say, as Mark Mauer said,
he sucks.
How many Stanley Cups does he have? One for all those years of coaching. So,
all right. Another Metro team we've mentioned a couple of times now, Washington Capitals. Look, they started out incredible. Then Ovi started off on a heater. Then he gets injured. I think most people expected them to take a step back with his injury because the vibes are gone. And now it's like, oh shit, now we still have to play. They've held the fort. They're 1 point from being in the division lead with 3 games in hand. If they win their next game, they'll just be in the lead with 3 games in hand on Jersey. They've played the same amount of games as Carolina, but they're 5 points up on them. And it looks like because he's been practicing with the team that Ovi should be back any day with the Caps. Like I said before, I've seen nothing that he is back, so I assume he's not yet. But I would imagine he's getting very close. And if he can jump back into this and pick up where he left off with his hot goal scoring, the Caps are an absolute force, and I would assume will be competing with Jersey all season long for this division lead.
I just want to say that with how good they've been without Ovi, that should terrify everybody throughout the
That
NHL.
should very much. You are absolutely correct. It should.
Yeah. When he comes back, it's game over. But now I have been waiting this whole episode to bring this up because it's about Ovechkin. I don't think with the time he's missed, I don't think he breaks the record this year. I just want to say that as much as I want him to more than anything in the world break it this year, but I don't think it happens now. I think it has to wait another season.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I will say for the Caps, first of all, to your point, it just depends. If he comes back and he's still scoring at the pace he was before, he'll probably get it. He could probably still do it by the last game or 2 of the season. But if he's even semi-human the rest of the way, I think you're probably right. He probably misses by a few. But for the Caps, how about winners of 10 of their last 13 games, 7 of their last 10? I mean, they've just been unbelievable. The combination of Charlie Lindgren and Logan Thompson has worked pretty well for them. This is one we mentioned. We mentioned how in LA and Edmonton they've kind of all come together. They've all come together as a group and stepped up, and their play has been really good. And that's kind of been Washington's MO all season, but especially in the absence of Alex Ovechkin, they've really played well for the most part. There are some games still where I question Charlie Lindgren and Logan Thompson. Sometimes they both have games where I'm like, what are you doing? And why are some of these soft ass goals getting by you? But even the best teams have stinkers. So you kind of just have to let that ride. But now again, Ovi's going to be coming back. The team's still playing incredibly well, largely. So I think they're feeling good. They're going to go into the Christmas break. I don't believe they are one of the teams that's playing tonight. I'd have to look at the NHL schedule. Actually, they are. They're playing the Bruins right now, so that there goes what I said. But they're tied with Boston
So there
right
goes
now.
a guaranteed win for Washington.
I was gonna say they're tied 1-1 right now as we're recording this, but they're either gonna go into the Christmas break with the lead in their division or 1 point back of the division lead um, with 3 games in hand on Jersey. So they're feeling good. They're likely getting Ovechkin back very soon. This is a team that you need to watch out for as we come out of the Christmas break, because if they hit the ground running out of the break with Ovi again, buckle up. They're not the deepest team. They're not the most glamorous star power team outside of Ovechkin, but clearly they're a tight knit group and they're winning a shitload of games, and that should scare anybody. Because we all know in the playoffs, sometimes it's not about who's the best; it's just about who gets hot at the right time. Now, last year was a perfect example. The Oilers probably weren't anybody's number one pick to go to the final with the play of Stuart Skinner, but he got really hot and they took off and went to the final. You never know. We could be talking about the Caps making a deep run in a couple months.
Yeah, I at this point I'm pretty much expecting that that's going to be the case, but I'm happy about that. I'm very happy that I was wrong with what I said at the beginning of this, or what I said in the preseason about how all Caps fans are going to have to look forward to is Ovi's record chase. I was dead wrong, and I'm very happy about that.
I was, you know what? No, we'll sit in that foxhole together because we were both kind of the same opinion. Like, this is a team that's just trying to figure out who they are. Well, even if they don't know yet, whatever they are is winning games. So
I would say whatever they are is working. So don't change a damn thing.
Yeah, because clearly it's worked out well. I want to move to the Atlantic before we close the show. Just give love to a couple teams over in the Atlantic really quick. The Ottawa Senators, on the back of Linus Ullmark, have just been incredible lately. 8 wins in their last 10, and Ullmark, I believe, has won 7 in a row. I know he's currently dealing with a back injury, but the Sens as a group are starting to play much better now, and so we've talked the last few years of Ottawa, of Detroit, of Buffalo. One of these 3 teams needed to make a step because they were all kind of in the same process of building up this good group, and they all had really good young talent. I personally thought Ottawa was probably the least likely of these 3 teams to take a step, and with Allmark now, it is, if assuming he's going to be healthy here after the break is up. It looks like Ottawa might finally be the one to emerge. Detroit and Buffalo are second last and last in the division and in the conference. Actually, Detroit's really had a rough go of it this year too lately. But Ottawa really starting to get their feet under them now. And again, if they can come out of the Christmas break with Ullmark healthy, they might have something there as far as putting a playoff run together, or as far as making a push for the playoffs.
Oh, you want me to sit here and compliment Ottawa?
Yeah, we need to glaze them, especially because I think it's hilarious that the goalie the Bruins traded away is playing great, and the one that they kept sucks. So
yeah, I'm laughing super fucking hard.
I know it is
so
hilarious.
funny.
Yeah, it is very funny. I agree.
Yeah, just like my whole life as a fucking Bruins fan. Oh, Jesus Christ! But you know what? In all seriousness, I still have absolutely nothing but love for Linus Ullmark. I miss him in Boston. And that's about all I can say good about Ottawa. So good night.
Well, it is funny because just a couple of weeks ago I was talking about how Allmark really hasn't had the season I bet he was hoping for, and since I've said that, he's completely shut me up. I mean, I think since I said that, he really hasn't lost. So
maybe he secretly listens to this show and we just don't know about it.
I doubt it.
Yeah, I doubt it too. But that would be some shit.
I wanted to give the Sens their love. We'll wait and see on Allmark's health, but for now they're playing really good going into the break, and I believe as it sits, they are in a playoff spot. Let me pull up ESPN standings here. They are the second, tied with Tampa for the second wild card spot right now. They got a 3-point lead on the Penguins, who are behind them, and they have a game in hand. So the Sens are sitting pretty good right now. I'm sure if you ask them, they would say that. But the one thing that does need to be of concern still for them, as well as they're playing, is it took a Linus Ullmark 7 or 8 game winning streak for them to climb into the playoffs. So it took them being perfect to get back in a playoff spot. So they still need to hold the fort here. They need to stay hot. They need to be, winning 60, 70% of these games. 500 hockey in the Eastern Conference is not going to be enough to be a good, effective playoff team, or potentially to even make the playoffs. So they're as good as they are right now. They're going to need to really keep this going as we come out of Christmas to ensure that they hold this spot.
Yeah, we'll see what happens, because every team, but sometimes people get little too lax when they have a few days off. So
Yep.
we'll see what happens.
Lord knows we will be. Me and you and our wives are fucking right off on Christmas, and I can't wait.
Yeah, and that's the understatement of the century.
Yeah, I was gonna say there will not be a safe beer or piece of fudge in the house.
Oh, dude, I know the Spritz cookies hate to see me coming. So
yeah, your wife is generously making those, and I can't wait for us to absolutely destroy those. All right, last thing before we go. So I just dumped on the Bruins, but I'll give you a chance to redeem yourself because we're going to talk about the Panthers and how they've completely righted the ship now. They've won 4 in a row. They've won 7 of their last 10. They sit atop the Atlantic Division. They are 3rd in the Eastern Conference. We mentioned the Stanley Cup final rematch they had against the Oilers. They're looking great now. The vibes are good. Everything's clicking for the Cats right now. And this is kind of what we expected of a team that just came off winning the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, like I said earlier in the show when we were talking about Edmonton, I mean, between Edmonton and Florida, I would not be surprised to see either of these teams repeat as East and West champs. I just they've looked good finally. I know the Panthers had a little bit of a rut here for a while, but they, like you said, they've righted the ship. The goals are being produced. The goaltending's looking actually pretty solid this year too. I'm a big fan of that. It's really nice to see Spencer Knight back, by the way. That's one thing.
I was just gonna say I actually have his player profile pulled up.
Yeah,
really good to see Spencer Knight come back,
yeah,
and I know his save percentage is still struggling, but again, it was kind of a rocky start for the Cats this year. Bob is the same way. They're both sub 900 save percentages, but they're starting to get back into it. And just for Knight to be coming in and winning some games, I think is great.
yes.
There was some, at least for me, and I'm sure for you as a fan of the team, there was some serious moments of concern for this young goalie while he was before he entered the player assistance program. I mean, he just looked like he had 1,000-yard stare out on the ice. There was that awful clip of him in warm up where he's just standing there flinging a puck back and forth, and he just looks lifeless. So good to see kind of a full turnaround there. I hope it continues for him and for Bob to continue to get those save percentages up. But the Panthers are really starting to look like a team that's interested in running it back. Yeah.
So hey, as a Panther fan, I sure as hell hope so. So, especially with how much the Bruins are letting me down right now. So,
you want to talk about teams letting you down? How about the Wild losing 4 straight?
Yeah, but the difference is the Wild are still one of the best teams in the league. So,
not if they keep losing to shitty teams, they won't be. But again, they're battling injury. That's a little bit of a different story right now. So that's why I haven't made mention of the fact that they've lost 4. They've been fighting the injury bug, but that's a later on conversation for after the break. Speaking of the Panthers, though, I do want to mention as we record, they are losing 3-0 to Tampa, but that's life.
They just beat them last night.
Yeah, say that's life in the big city for you. Yeah, they just beat Tampa. When was that?
It was either last night or Saturday night.
That was last night. They won 4-2. Spencer Knight with the win in that game.
And they had 2 shorthanded goals on the same penalty kill.
There you go.
Yep.
So, but yeah, Panthers definitely look like they're getting it back on track. Obviously, they're going to need the goaltending to continue to step up if they're really going to climb into this, because goaltending is going to win you another championship if they're going to do it.
Absolutely. And I would love nothing more than that. But right now, I just want them to play like the team I know they're capable of playing. That's my main concern right now. We'll worry about running it back when the playoffs roll around.
Yep, that's right. Let's focus on getting there, and then we'll worry about how the run looks later on. All right. Well, with that, we don't have any questions this week because this time we did our homework and checked before the show.
Correct.
So we know for a fact we don't have any this week, but don't be afraid to get those in. We're all over social media, Fresh Ice Hockey Podcast on Instagram and Facebook at our Instagram at Fresh Ice Hockey Podcast. I'm on Instagram at Brian Fresh Ice. Send us a DM, leave your comment in the YouTube comments if you're on YouTube watching. As always, thank you so much for listening to our show. And I hope the holiday season is good to all of you. If you're celebrating Christmas, I hope Santa brings you all kinds of toys. And I know he's going to bring me and you some beers and some chocolates and some cookies.
I hope he brings you a new mic.
He might. I hope to God he does, because Lord knows I fucking need one. So
yeah, man. I don't really have too much to add here, man. It's put a good hour show in. I got a Packer game to go watch because they're they're playing for a playoff spot tonight. For those of you who don't know this about me, I am a pretty aggressive Green Bay Packers fan. So at this point, I think I'm going to follow the advice that my platoon sergeant used to give us every weekend before we'd go out to party when I was in the Army, and that is wrap it up. So with that being said, Brian, do you have anything left to add?
I don't. I just want to reiterate, everybody have a safe Christmas if you're celebrating, and we'll be back on Sunday to kind of recap this year in hockey, and that'll do it for the 2024 calendar. But I'm excited. I can't believe this year's already almost over. It feels like it flew by.
Yeah, it's a little disgusting how fast it went. But again, I echo what Brian said. Whatever holiday it is, you and your family celebrate this time of year. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you enjoy your time with your family, because that's really what this time of year is all about. So from both of us and our families to you and yours, happy holidays, and we'll see you on the next episode of Fresh Ice.